science professor and author of the Winthrop poll from Winthrop University. Scott, we just saw that the polls closed. We don't have anything to really talk about yet. We haven't seen many results yet, but what are your initial thoughts on this race as it stands right now between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump?
Well, as the polls have been indicating, it's Trump's to lose. I mean, the real question is how much will he win by? You know, Nikki Haley doesn't want to be embarrassed in her home state. So a massive loss, 30 points or more, like some polls have shown, would be terrible. A real victory for her would be a loss in the teens. So, you know, we could see somewhere in between those two extremes. She will probably continue to stay in the race, especially if she loses by less than 30. She's got the money. You know, usually candidates drop out because when they're losing, they can't raise money. Nikki Haley's been an exception. She's been losing, but she can still raise money.
That's true. Yeah, she raised $11.5 million in January. She's been crisscrossing this down her bus tour the last 2 weeks here and turning people out, right? It's not like there's like 10 people showing up to these events. She's having maybe 50 in Bamberg, her hometown, but also getting thousands in Daniel Island in the Charleston area. So there's still enthusiasm in a sense. And we're also seeing some early voting numbers, which we can talk about in a moment. But when you have the money and you have some enthusiasm and you have her saying, I'm going to go beyond South Carolina regardless of the outcome, where does this go, Scott?
Well, you know, obviously the next big stop is Super Tuesday. You have such a massive number of states. The overwhelming majority of delegates are going to be awarded then, almost to the point where if Trump were to get them all, he would be almost undefeatable. Shortly after Super Tuesday, he'll probably amass enough delegates where mathematically it becomes impossible. But she will get to apply her message across the nation. The difference will be there are some places that are open primaries, some places that are closed primaries. But as we've seen in her home state, the nature of the Republican Party has changed, and it is no longer your father's Republican Party. It has definitely become Trump's Republican Party.
Yeah, and Scott, we have breaking news right now. I just saw from the Associated Press's Meg Kennard tweeting that former President Donald Trump has indeed won the South Carolina primary. We were waiting for the Associated Press to call that. That came right, I think, at 7:02 p.m., so early. Right. Polls close at 7 o'clock. Scott, we still have a whole show. We have folks out in the field. We're going to go and see them. You get that live shot there from the Trump rally here in Columbia. So we don't know when to expect former President Donald Trump to address that crowd there. But, Scott, I mean, 7:02, Donald Trump wins South Carolina.
You know, and this comes from not just the Associated Press, but, you know, all of the press organizations that go in together on exit polling and things like that. So they've been getting updates during the day, all day long, that have been, you know, sent in. It's now probably via smartphone. Back when I did it in college, I worked for exit polls, had to stop during the day and go literally phone in the results up to that hour. So they've seen all along, and calling it within a few minutes. Not a great look, but it's also absolutely no surprise.
And Scott, I say we have a whole show. We have 2 hours to talk about everything going on in South Carolina. It's still our show for a while, but we will be looking at how much she lost by and what those numbers mean going forward, like we've been talking about that. We'll hear from folks in the field. But let's go to the Trump rally right now with, see if he's taking the stage there. That's right. You can hear the start there. We're going to see from former President Donald Trump, who's taking the stage there. He's flanked by all those South Carolina elected officials that have backed him. He's shaking former governor, current governor, I should say, Henry McMaster's hand. He's about to address the crowd there. It seems pretty lively. There's Lieutenant Governor Pamela Abbott. Again, we should mention that Henry McMaster has been with Donald Trump since 2016. He was the first statewide elected official in the country to back Donald Trump, and it has paid Henry McMaster dividends. Not only did he, you know, get Donald Trump to get Nikki Haley to the United Nations, clearing the way for him to become governor in 2017, but also helped him get reelected in 2018 in that runoff. And of course, he's been there every step of the way for him too. So we're still hearing some music there at the Trump rally, which if you've ever been to one is always, it's quite riveting. It's quite engaging, Scott. I know he was just in Rock Hill, your neck of the woods, but you didn't make a chance to get there because it is also somewhat of an all-day affair.
Yes, you know, the lines are incredibly long. There are vendors out there selling every type of imaginable piece of merchandise, cups and T-shirts. And it is truly a festival type atmosphere at a Trump rally nowadays. And again, it goes to show just the nature that the Republican Party has become, centered around one massive celebrity who is adored by his fans. It's not just policy, it's not just politics, it is an adoration of Donald Trump.
And former President Trump was also in the state for Valentine's Day in North Charleston. That's where I got to spend Valentine's Day. And he was also in Conway, South Carolina, where he made some interesting comments about NATO and Nikki Haley's husband, who is serving abroad overseas. We can talk about all that later after we hear from the president, the former president, I should say, who is standing by. You hear that music right now if you're listening on South Carolina Public Radio. He's at his rally here in Columbia, and he's about to address us. We're going to stand by for that. But again, you saw all those elected officials. Nikki Haley was saying, I don't care that I don't have their support. I'm an underdog. I'm an outsider. I don't need those folks. Has Donald Trump become an insider?
You know, he is an insider who has run as an outsider, and same with Nikki Haley.
And we're about to start here, Scott. Donald Trump's about to address us.
Thank you very much. Wow. That is really something. This was a little sooner than we anticipated. It was an even bigger win than we anticipated. And I was just informed that we got double the number of votes that has ever been received in the great state of South Carolina. So that's pretty good. So it's a record ×2, and there's something going on in the country. Some really great things are going on. You look outside and you see all of the horror. You see millions and millions of people coming across the border illegally. We don't know where they come from. They come from jails. They come from prisons. They come from all sorts of places that we don't want to know. They come from mental institutions and insane asylums. And we don't want that in our country. We're not going to stand for it. We're not going to stand for it. You have terrorists coming in. You have people coming in that we just can't do this. No country could sustain what's happening to the United States of America. No country. So we're going to straighten things out. The border is the worst it's ever been. You know, in 2016 we won, and we had a bad border, and I talked about the border a lot, talked about it a lot. And I said, we're going to fix it, we're going to fix it. We fixed it very quickly. And in 2020, we couldn't talk about it, although we did get millions of more votes a second time. But now there's a spirit that I have never seen. We ran 2 great races, but there's never been a spirit like this. And I just want to say that I have never seen the Republican Party so unified as it is right now. Never been like that. And a big part of that is the people standing behind me. These are the biggest officials in South Carolina, but I say like the biggest officials in our country as far as I'm concerned. They're state figures, but they're national figures, and in the truest sense of the word, they love our country so much, and they want to see our country succeed and be respected again. Right now, we're a laughingstock all over the world. Our country is going to be respected again, respected like never before. So this is a fantastic evening. It's an early evening and a fantastic. So you can all go down and you can celebrate for about 15 minutes, and we have to get back to work because the big date, you know, Michigan's coming up. We're doing great. The auto workers are going to be with us 100% because they got sold out by this country. But Michigan's up, and we're going to have a tremendous success there. And then we have a thing called Super Tuesday, and I think we're leading 91-7 overall. If you don't mind, may I have the pleasure of introducing some incredible people? Because they stuck right from the beginning, from the very moment we announced, and they believe in make America great again. That's what they believe in. They believe in America first. We're putting America first. First of all, my family, Melania, Barron, Don Jr. and Kimberly, Ivanka and Jared, Tiffany and Michael. They're so supportive. So supportive of me, and we really appreciate it and love them. They're great. We have a great family, and we have incredible friends, and we're going to be up here on November 5th, and we're going to look at Joe Biden, and we're going to look him right in the eye. He's destroying our country, and we're going to say, Joe, you're fired. Get out. Get out, Joe. You're fired. They're destroying our country, and I just wish we could do it quicker. 9 months is a long time. I just wish we could do it quicker, Mr. Governor. Is there anything you can do with your vast powers to make that, in certain countries, you're allowed to call your election date. If I had the right to do it, I'd do it tomorrow. I'd say, we're having an election tomorrow. Henry, is there anything you can do? I want to start off because right from the beginning, Henry McMaster, the governor of this incredible state, and much more importantly, his wife, Peggy, she's with him all the way, I'll tell you. Never saw anything. What a couple. But I'd like to ask him to say a few words. He's a very special man, an incredible governor, very popular in the state. And really, I mean, he gave us some very good advice. And he has right from the beginning. From the day I announced, I had the lieutenant governor. He was the lieutenant governor. And from right at the beginning, when I announced, and I said, I don't know the gentleman. Is he good? They said, he's really great. I said, well, I hope so. And you know what? Within about 2 weeks, I said, that guy is unbelievable. I never got the support of the governor. She supported somebody else, but I had the support of somebody much, much better, Henry McMaster, and we won in a landslide. And I'd like to ask the governor to say a few words. Please, Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be very brief. Y'all, I would like you all to remember this moment that you were here. This is a great moment in American history. We will probably never see another one like it. Every time a rocket launches, it goes up slow, and then it's climbing and climbing, and then boom, that next stage comes off, and it goes. Well, we just did that. We just hit maximum velocity, and we're going all the way.
So I'm going to ask somebody else to say, because he came on board and Lindsey wanted him and the lieutenant governor wanted him and everybody wanted him. Henry and Peggy wanted him. So I thought he was okay, but he didn't love speaking about himself because he's a good person. See, I have no problem with that. It's a problem. What a personality, I don't know. But he endorsed me. And then we asked him to go and do a few shows, and they're not often nice shows. They're very hostile. And what he did was, I said, is this the same man? And he campaigned nicely, but he's a high-quality person. When he was supporting me, the day, is that correct, Lindsey, when he went out, Tim Scott, Senator Tim Scott, he went out, and he was ripping it. I said, what happened to Tim Scott? What a dynamo. And he has been one of our great advocates. He's been doing things that have been unbelievable. And I'm just very happy he didn't have that same energy, drive, because I think I probably would have been out of the race a long time ago. But I want to say, a very special man. I really do mean it. So many people have such great respect for him, and you're very lucky to have him in the state. Tim, please, say a few words.
Hello, South Carolina! The longer I speak, the less you hear of him. So let me just ask one survey question, and you better answer it loud and clear. Is South Carolina Trump country?
Thank you very much, Tim. Really great job. Amazing. Another man, not a lot of people know him. He doesn't do too much television. He happens to be a little bit further left than some of the people on the stage. But I always say, when I'm in trouble on the left, I call up Lindsey Graham, and he straightens it out so fast. And I'll tell you, no, remember, I love him. He's a good man. Come up here, Lindsey. Come up here, Lindsey. Come here.
Okay, are you ready? America, the nightmare you're facing is just about over. Help is on the way. This is the most qualified man to be president of the United States. And let it be said that South Carolina created the biggest political comeback in American history.
Thank you, Lindsey. So, I have a son who's a very talented guy, and he works so hard, and we love him, and his wife is very good. She goes on, and Laura. And I want to thank Eric and Laura for doing such a fantastic job, and really amazing. They're amazing people. Let's go down a little list of some of the people that are up here tonight, because every one of them is a star in their own right. And your lieutenant governor is going places. You do know that, right? Yeah. Pamela Evatt. And really going places. And Speaker of the House, Merrill Smith, who's coming up in a couple. You know, some of these people are actually busy. He's running to get over here. But we want to thank you, Speaker of the House. Fantastic person, doing a great job for the state. An Attorney General who's been in the news lately a lot, winning cases. Oh, I wish we had such a good Attorney General like that in New York. Oh. He's a great Attorney General. Alan Wilson, thank you, Alan. His father happens to be up here, too. Remember his famous, "You lied," remember? He's been loved ever since, hasn't he, huh? Treasurer Curtis Loftus. Curtis, thank you very much, wherever you may be. Thank you. Thank you, Curtis. Mark Hammond, Secretary of State. Thank you, Mark. Ambassador, and this is a great ambassador, one of the best. Anytime we had a problem, I just call Ed McMullen, and he would solve the problem very quickly. Ed, thank you very much. We have a man who's done a really good job in the state, your South Carolina GOP chair, Drew McKissick. Thank you. Thank you. We have a highly opinionated group of people. I'll tell you, they've turned very positive on you very quickly, Elizabeth. So, you have a beautiful, beautiful state right next to you, North Carolina. We love North Carolina, right? In fact, they named their daughter Carolina. And I said, which state? She said both. I think I know which state, but that's okay. But they have the most beautiful daughter named Carolina. So we love both of them. We love them both very much. And we won them both very easily. And one of the reasons we won North Carolina is a man named Michael Whatley, who looks to me, we gave him our endorsement, and he looks to me like he's going to be going on to the National Republican Party as the boss. Michael Whatley. Where is Michael? Michael, thank you very much. And he's going to be working with Laura. And we may be putting Kellyanne in the group, too. Do we like Kellyanne? We love Kellyanne, right? But you're going to do a fantastic job, both of you. We appreciate it very much. What a job he's done in North Carolina. You know, that evening of 2020 with those votes coming in, we're leading in Pennsylvania, and all of a sudden, oh, something happened. It went boom. And then we're leading all over the place, Georgia, and then boom. And we're leading, but North Carolina, I said, when is that going to go? When are they going to drop lots of ballots into that one? And you know what he did? He just kept that thing, and we never had a problem. And I said, that's my kind of guy. He had hundreds of lawyers. How many lawyers did you have? 500 lawyers. He had 500 lawyers to make sure they didn't cheat, and they didn't cheat in North Carolina. And I said, that's my kind of guy, so I appreciate it. Great job. We're very proud of you, and you're going to do a fantastic job. And come election period, you know, we used to have election night. Now we have election period because some of these elections go on for 48 days, 61 days. Then they announce, they get all this equipment, and they announce, they'll be announcing the vote in 3 weeks from now. Can you imagine? They don't know what they're doing, but I will tell you, you have done a fantastic job, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. We also have a lot of members of Congress, including members of Congress out in the audience. This room is full of energy, and our party is full of energy like never before. And I mean it. There's never been unity. There has never been unity in our party. Just the fact, think of it, we've had a lot of primaries in this state. The fact that we got double the number of votes in history, there's never been anything like that. Who's ever heard of that? So we have members of Congress with us. I'm very proud of this one because I sort of said, that guy would be great. We had somebody that did a vote that I wasn't exactly happy with. He voted to impeach your favorite president. And until then, he'd love to have that vote back, I can tell you. But until then, he was a man that couldn't be beaten. I said, really, let's see. I said, who do we have that's good? They said, the best we have is a man named Russell Fry. And Russell Fry got out there, beat him so badly in the primaries. He had my support. And he's been a fantastic congressman. So wherever you may be, hi, Russell. What a great job. Thank you. Thank you very much. That was great. We got rid of that one. We got rid of a lot of them. Almost, I guess, every one of them. Almost every one of them. Now they're gone. The impeachers are all gone. Nancy Mace is here, a non-controversial person, but she's a real advocate, and she's become a real advocate, and I appreciate it, Nancy, very much. Thank you very much. She's a very strong woman, and we want strong women. We like strong women. William Timmons, Congressman William Timmons, who's been a fantastic warrior for our country. Joe Wilson, I spoke to you about him before. He is tough and he is smart. And he and his beautiful wife produced a wonderful, wonderful Attorney General. So, Joe, thank you very much, and you've done a fantastic job, loves our country. Michael Waltz knows more about the military probably than anybody. And we see him on a lot, and I always want his opinion. And he's got very strong opinions, and he hates to see what's happening to our country. That I can tell you, but he'll straighten it out. We'll all straighten it out together. Michael Collins. Michael, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Great job. A very non-controversial person, but a very good person. People don't understand. This is a very good person, and he's a very capable man, Matt Gaetz. Thank you, Matt. That's not bad, Matt. Wow. Wow. That's impressive. I'm very impressed, right? Very good. Matt, what's going on? How many people did you put up here, huh? That's fantastic. And by the way, before I forget, we have a group of people, and I know this is okay with you, from North Carolina. It's about 60 women that travel all over the country with me. Every time I'm out, we do a rally. We have to do, at least it has to be of significance, so usually rallies. But I think they're up to number 121. They've done 100. They're all beautiful women. Obviously, they're very wealthy. They look so wealthy and beautiful. Look at them over here. But they travel all over the country, and way over 100. And I'm trying to figure out the husband. They're all happily married. They have these wonderful husbands. Hey, one of the husbands is standing right there. He's the smartest one of all. But I just want to thank you. Your support is so incredible. I get out, and it's like a breath of fresh air. I look at these incredible people, and at least here we're having one that's very close, right? You don't have to travel out to California and Texas and all the other places. Well, we very much appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Very special women. A woman who was actually out campaigning today. She is the hardest worker. I said, Marjorie, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. I said, Marjorie, you don't have to do. She went to a polling sector, and she had the Trump flag, and she's waving it and screaming vote. I said, Marjorie, it's 4:30. It's just about over for the vote. Please. She said, nope, I'm staying longer. This is the hardest working, wherever you are, the most incredible woman. She's respected by everybody. She is very smart. And I'm just very happy that she's on our side. Right, Eric? I'm very happy that she's on our side, right? So it's been an incredible period of time. We have a country that is a failing nation, but we're not going to have a failing nation very long. We are not going to allow this to happen. We love our country. We love it dearly. We're going to fight for our country. We're going to fight for our rights. We're not going to let this go on because it is not sustainable by any country. You cannot let, I believe, the number by the time we get him out. And remember the date, November 5th. It's going to be the most important date perhaps in the history of our country. The election is on November 5th. So we have Michigan coming next week. We have Super Tuesday. We have them all coming. You know, we've set a record so far in in Iowa, we got the most votes in history times 2, just like this, the biggest margin ever. We then went to New Hampshire. You know, New Hampshire and Iowa, they've been around a long time politically. And we went to New Hampshire. We got the most votes in the history. That's like who has the most home runs, who has the most hits in baseball, or who threw the most touchdowns in football, who got the most points in basketball. It's very simple. We got the most votes in the history of New Hampshire primary. That's a tremendous, and that goes back so many decades, and we beat them. You know, you have John F. Kennedy. You have a lot of good people to beat, and we beat them by not a little bit, by a lot. And then we went Virgin Islands. I want to thank the Virgin Islands because they made a very strong play for the Virgin Islands, and we got 100% of the Virgin Islands. And then, of course, Nevada, as you know, we went to Nevada. We got 99.6% of the vote. And then they had a primary, and this is no candidate. You know, it's called, this is, they had various forms, unknown candidate, they had all. But this is no candidate, got 65% of the vote. And they think I was the no candidate because it was a caucus, it wasn't a primary, and you have to know what you're doing. You have to go into the caucus, not the primary. But without going into it, I think we won by 50 points or something like that. So, and then we come here, and what an honor this is. You know, in South Carolina, I've won every primary by a record, and we've won every election by a record. And people like these two, and like this great governor and your great lieutenant governor, and I have to say, thank you very much, Pam. What a job. Thank you. They make it really easy, and many of them, as I was announcing, it seems like a long time ago, but as I was announcing, before I finished the speech, they said, we're endorsing Trump. Those are friends. Those are great, great friends. And we had some strong competitors. I mean, we had some very strong competitors, but these were real friends. South Carolina, thank you very much. Go home, get rest. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We love you all. God bless you all. God bless you all. Thank you very much. God bless you.
You just heard from former President Donald Trump giving his victory speech here in South Carolina because he was named the winner at 7:02 p.m. by the Associated Press. So we just heard him live here in Columbia. Of course, all the results are not in yet, despite what we heard from the former president. In fact, we're seeing only 17,400 votes in, and 0 counties reporting. We have a lot of early voting numbers that we're probably looking at too. But right now it's 50% Trump, 48% Nikki Haley. So of course that number is going to change as the coming hours, and we'll see that number change. But Scott, what were some of the moments that you just heard from the former president that really jumped out to you? Well,
you know, obviously the shout out of almost literally everybody on the stage and half of the audience as well was, you know, he had to get that in there. It was interesting to see him bring Tim Scott forward. I actually expected Tim Scott to say a little bit more. Is this, you know, an audition? But, you know, then again, all he did was rile up the crowd, which is what he's supposed to do. Interesting to me was the boos Lindsey Graham got. There were people throwing thumbs down at him. His approval ratings in South Carolina have been on the decline. Even among Republicans, right now his approval ratings are just barely over 50, and among the state in general, his approval ratings are in the 30s. So among Republicans, his approval rating by Republicans is the lowest of all of them. So I expected he wouldn't be beloved, but actual boos, that thing was a little.
Well, and yeah, he even said a little bit further to the left, talking about Lindsey Graham there. I mean, no one wants to be introduced like that at a Republican moment. And I did see Donald Trump rally in Pickens July 4th weekend last year, and Lindsey Graham was booed for 4 minutes straight there, too. So this was just a little bit of that. Everyone had a couple moments up there, too, to talk. But also, we didn't hear him mention Nikki Haley's name, his one opponent in this race. I think just me having listened to her stump speech so many times over the past few weeks and months in Iowa and New Hampshire, she continued to hammer him about his speech in New Hampshire on election night, and even making a big applause line, a laugh line when she mentions that he talked about her dress that night, too. And all he did was talk about revenge and attacking her and never about the country. Well, you didn't even hear him mention Nikki Haley tonight, and he was talking more about his vision for the country. So it seems like he's kind of pivoting more now to that general election tone.
Yeah, this was definitely a pivot away from the primaries. Of course, he mentioned, well, we're going on to Super Tuesday, we're going on to Michigan, we're going on to the next states. But the fact is, he is clearly now running for president of the United States. He is not running for the nomination anymore. He fully expects victory. He alluded to her briefly, when he talked about what happened in Nevada. And of course, for folks not familiar, they did have a caucus which the party wanted, and they had to have a primary as well, which the party did not want. So the party was only going to award delegates from the caucus. And Nikki Haley ran in the primary, Donald Trump ran in the caucus, Donald Trump ran away with the caucus, of course, and Nikki Haley lost to none of these candidates.
Like you said, yeah.
And that was what he was alluding to at the time. But you're right, he didn't name her. It was interesting. He talked, I love strong women. Look at these folks who follow me. Didn't mention her.
Yeah, he was talking about Nancy Mace, their first congressional district representative, Nancy Mace, who I was in North Charleston with that rally that he had there on Valentine's Day, and said, we've come a long way. We've come a long way. They have had somewhat of a contentious relationship there, but she was on stage there introducing him, and of course they're tonight in Columbia, where Maayan Schechter, where South Carolina Public Radio is also at that event. Maayan, tell us how things are going there. We just saw that long speech there from the president, not as long as what we saw in Rock Hill or his other events over the couple days where he can go as long as 90 minutes, but really got out there early, started talking, started thanking a lot of his supporters. What's the vibe like out there?
Well, the vibe was pretty excited a few minutes ago, but the party is basically a little bit over now, given that the AP called the race at about 7 o'clock, 7:01. We saw a handful of South Carolina who's who, from the governor to lieutenant governor, senators, state lawmakers, and you've heard former President Donald Trump give shout-outs to them a lot. I thought one of the most interesting things that the former president said on stage was that he had never seen the Republican Party as unified as it is right now. And then, as both of y'all mentioned, he called up Senator Lindsey Graham, the crowd booed. And then he called up Drew McKissick, the chairman of the state GOP, the crowd booed. Kind of representative a little bit of some of the fraction that has been happening inside the South Carolina Republican Party coalition. But we still see people mingling around. It's not a huge crowd by any means. People are kind of dancing to the music right now, but this is a pretty early party and everybody's pretty happy.
So thank you, Maayan. Yeah, we can talk about party unity in minutes, Scott, but I want to go to Thalisha Edie, who is at Nikki Haley's watch party in Charleston, where her campaign is based down there in Charleston. We're going to go to Thalisha Edie with South Carolina Public Radio to see what's going on there at Nikki Haley's watch party. Like we were talking about earlier, we didn't hear Donald Trump mention Nikki Haley in his speech, his victory speech here after he was being declared the winner. And we're standing by for Thalisha right now. I think we're waiting for her. Go ahead, Thalisha. How's it going down there, Thalisha, with everything happening with Donald Trump being named the winner there?
Hey, good evening, Gavin. Yeah, we're here at the Charleston Place Hotel in historic downtown Charleston, just under an hour from Kiowa Island, where Nikki Haley cast her ballot earlier this morning. I think for anyone who were just loosely following this race, they would have heard several times now leading up to tonight that Nikki Haley, the former governor, was not expected to carry her home state. And just as you reported, that was indeed the case. I think for Haley and the supporters that are filling the space behind me, including South Carolina former First Lady Jimmy Sanford, I think the goal for tonight is to drive home the message that she's not going to win tonight. She's not even going to close that margin. But I think the message that we really want to send to the public is that Nikki Haley is the candidate for all Americans and the candidate that's truly trying to put America first. And we saw that in her last tour bus stops here across South Carolina, where she said, regardless of what happens tonight, she will continue to stay in the race until everyone votes. So as people fill into this place, as supporters for Nikki Haley fill into this place, I think that's going to be her message for tonight. So we're reporting here. We'll see what happens later on tonight. She hasn't taken the stage just yet, but we are expecting her. And again, she says regardless of what happens tonight, she is not leaving the race. She's going to stay here until the last vote is counted, until the last person gets the opportunity to vote. And also we saw messaging in Haley's message this week as she crisscrossed the state. We also saw her drawing sharper attacks against former President Donald Trump and also drawing parallels between him and President Biden, saying that they both create chaos. She's not the candidate to do that. And I want to go back again to her not dropping out of the race like she said she was going to do. I think that's in her message to appeal to people past South Carolina's primary and past Super Tuesday, where she's hoping that she will appeal more to a broader spectrum of Americans. So we'll see what happens. Again, we are expecting the former governor and UN ambassador shortly. This place is filling up again. We saw some dignitaries, including former South Carolina First Lady Jimmy Sanford. Hopefully we'll get the opportunity to talk with her as well. Back to you.
Thanks, Talisha. Yeah, Scott, quite a different visual there, too. Like you just heard from Talisha, the only dignitary she has seen floating around so far is former First Lady Jimmy Sanford. The only big endorsement she had from the congressional level was Ralph Norman from up your neck of the woods. I have seen her going across the state. She has had the support of some local state representatives as well as solicitors, you know, that law and order look there. But quite the contrast there. We heard the Huey Lewis playing in the background. The playlist is bumping. People seem to be a little enthusiastic still. What's the message going to have to be from her to kind of keep the enthusiasm going on to Michigan to Super Tuesday? Well,
you know, one of the things was as she traveled across South Carolina, trying to get as many endorsements as she could on stage with her. And Trump was really essentially needling her by pointing out all of the major endorsements that he got from people that had served with her. You know, what she's going to have to do going forward is try and downplay the size of the loss. And that's what we don't know. Like, you know, what was said about waiting till every vote is counted. She really needs to know how much she's lost by, because if she loses by only in the teens, that's essentially a victory. That would be one heck of a comeback from being 30 to 36 points behind. If she loses by 30 points, on the other hand, that is going to be a whole different set of messaging. And one of the things it's saying is, I can't win in the South, so I'm trying to pick up votes in the non-South on you know, Super Tuesday. Well, of course, there are some southern states on Super Tuesday, of course. But the thing about modern Republican presidents is if a modern Republican president at the national level can sweep the 11-state South, they have won more than 50% of the Electoral College votes they need to become president and need less than 30% of the Electoral College votes in the entire rest of the country. So for her to show that she cannot win in the South as a Republican doesn't show a lot of enthusiasm, and she's going to have to take that and massage that message going forward.
Scott, do you think maybe that's also a reason maybe this could be closer than we think it's going to be? Obviously, we're still, we have few numbers in so far, under 30,000 numbers. Polls closed just 40 minutes ago. But do you think that was a way for Trump to get ahead of any potential close or surprise when it comes to maybe getting close in the teens? You know, what we've seen maybe in New Hampshire. Well, 11%.
You know, one of the things, Trump made a whole lot of claims about the size of his victory, the percentage that he got, and those numbers are just quite literally unavailable. I mean, we just don't know and won't know until they're officially in. because we have safe and secure ballots and safe and secure voting. So, all the votes have not been counted. These, at best, are estimates from his own internal polling. I can only guess, but he says he won by more than doubled up her vote. That is entirely possible, given the way the polling has been going, but we simply don't know that. He has gotten out in front, and only if she has an incredible comeback, even if she's certainly not expected to win, she won't win, but if she has an incredible comeback, that argument that, oh, I doubled up her vote, in a normal race, I would say that would come back to bite him, but this is Donald Trump. Well, what he says is just not going to matter.
Yeah, and right now what I'm seeing, we have 6% of results in, and Donald Trump is at 57%, Nikki Haley at 42%, so a solid 15% margin right there. But before we get into more results and analysis and going back to our reporters in the field, we're going to go to South Carolina Republican Party Chairman Drew McKissick, who was at ETV earlier today speaking with Maayan Schechter of South Carolina Public Radio. We're going to play that clip right now.
Mr. McKissick, over 200,000 people have already voted early. We have high turnout in Greenville and Horry County. What are you expecting as far as turnout tonight, and what do you think that should tell the rest of the country about South Carolina?
Well, first off, I think we're going to see a record. So 208,000 Republicans early voted, which was about 75,000 more than the Democrats had for their entire primary, by the way. So that tells you where the enthusiasm is. It's with Republicans on our side of the street, not with Democrats. And today I project that we're going to set a record. The record was 765,000 back in 2016. Those early vote numbers tell me we'll blow through that today. And again, that tells me there's enthusiasm for the party and for our candidates. And as we look, to the rest of the country, or as the rest of the country looks to South Carolina, as they traditionally do for what we're going to do when it comes to the nomination, I would point out that since 1980, no Republican has gone on to win the White House without winning the South Carolina Republican primary, ever. We are the graveyard of presidential campaigns. That's part of what we do. Because we're the last state in that one state at a time roller coaster where you can focus all your time and attention on one state to try to do well before you move on to the next group. Well, 10 days after South Carolina, you've got Super Tuesday. So if you don't do well here, you're not going to be able to do well in Super Tuesday and around the country going forward. That's what happens in every single cycle in the past, and I expect that'll happen again today. Yeah, so South Carolina is, I would argue, very representative of the Republican coalition nationally, and has been, throughout modern politics. Currently, we've got social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, populist conservatives, national security conservatives, a bigger percentage of retired veterans here in South Carolina than most places around the country. That's very representative of the Republican Party nationwide. And I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to get it right. Yeah, so South Carolina is, I would argue, very representative of the Republican coalition nationally, and has been, throughout modern politics. Currently, we've got social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, populist conservatives, national security conservatives, a bigger percentage of retired veterans here in South Carolina than most places around the country. That's very representative of the Republican Party nationwide. And I think that's one of the reasons why we tend to get it right.
Obviously, all polling indicates that former President Donald Trump will win tonight. Back in 2020, with him on the ballot, Republicans were able to flip 5 seats in the legislature. What are your expectations in November here?
Well, we look to take more state House and state Senate seats, quite frankly. We picked up 4 seats last time that we hadn't won in 150 years, in addition to other seats that we picked up. There's going to be a lot of local races we're focusing on this year because we have no statewide race this year, so it's more of a local focus. But surely pickups in the state House and state Senate, county council races, sheriff's races, probate judge races, and things of that nature. That's our focus.
All right, that was South Carolina Republican Party Chairman Drew McKissick there talking to our South Carolina Public Radio reporter, Maayan Schechter, earlier today here at ETV. And I'm going to bring you guys some results right now. We're going to show a full-page graphic here of what the race is looking like so far. Again, it's very early. Polls just closed 45 minutes ago. And, of course, the Associated Press called the race for former President Donald Trump. And you can see right now he is leading Nikki Haley at 58% to 41%, a solid 17-point margin there. We'll be watching how that changes over the coming hours as the results continue to come in. It's still very early here. But I'm in studio here with Scott Huffman, who is Winthrop University political science professor. And Scott, I was looking while we were listening to Drew McKissick there about when we heard the Associated Press call other races in early states for Donald Trump because he has won all these contests so far: Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, U.S. Virgin Islands. And when we saw in Iowa, I remember I was at the caucus site. You know, things were going on around 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock still. But Associated Press called it at 8:25 p.m. and folks were pretty heated about that. But this one right at 7 o'clock. I mean, just goes to show how strong it is here.
Yeah, there was really never any question, especially after the other folks started dropping out of the race and she wasn't automatically picking up the support that they had had. In our poll, 70+% of Donald Trump's support was with him from the beginning, whereas only about 50% of Nikki Haley's support had been with her from the beginning. And so she picked up some, but not enough. And so, Donald Trump, he just kept on gaining momentum. And in South Carolina, it was almost a victory lap. He didn't really engage her. He didn't spend that much money here. He didn't debate in any of the states and any of the debates. And basically, he treated it as if it were a coronation. And his followers treated it the exact same way.
Yeah, that's something that she's been saying that's why she's still in the race, essentially, that we don't make kings here in America. We have to keep fighting. That was her excuse to kind of stay in this race and keep fighting and fighting. And she's been fundraising, too, which is critical to going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what happens to that fundraising now after today. But I think when we saw her give that speech in Greenville on Tuesday, that speech primarily was to, get media attention, because everyone thought she was going to drop out, 4 days before her home state, regardless of getting whatever loss that was in the cards for her today. But also just to really put that message out there ahead of whatever happened today, that expectations are what they are, and she's still going to go forward.
Yeah, and she has said that from the beginning. The fact that she can still raise money after the losses, most candidates, as we've already seen, had to drop out. They ran out of money. She is still able, after losing, multiple times, to be able to travel around and pick up money. And that is a little different than usual. Somebody who had lost this many times and came in third the first time in Iowa and had that embarrassing loss in Nevada simply wouldn't be able to raise money, and she has been able to continue her fundraising. She appears to be set to be able to continue to do it through Super Tuesday, but as you pointed out, if she has an overwhelming and embarrassing loss in South Carolina, that might cut into her ability to do that. But if she stays in all the way through Super Tuesday, she will be the only one in a position to, if Donald Trump loses to Joe Biden in the general election, to be able to say, I told you so, I stayed in as long as possible, and she will still have the war chest that she's been building.
But is that going to tarnish her going forward if she has her eye on 2028?
Well, in the short term, it may. If she makes a big, brouhaha somehow at the convention, absolutely. If she doesn't drop out with grace at some point, it may in the short term tarnish her image. But in the long term, we know that Donald Trump can make friends with his enemies, and things can change a whole lot in 4 years. And Nikki Haley, I guarantee you, even after she drops out, she will continue to be on the media circuit and keep her relevance, especially in Republican politics, very high.
Gotcha. That's Scott Huffman there. And we're going to jump to Talisha Edie, who's down in Charleston at Nikki Haley's watch party. We have not heard from the former governor yet. We already heard from former President Donald Trump shortly after the Associated Press called the race for him, and he spoke for about 20 minutes or so. But Talisha Edie has former First Lady Jenny Sanford with her. Jenny Sanford, a big supporter of Nikki Haley, as was her former husband, Mark Sanford, the governor, who helped get Nikki Haley in the mansion, the governor's mansion. So let's go to Talisha right now.
Hey, Gavin, yes, we are here at the Charleston Place Hotel at Nikki Haley's headquarters, and we're here with, of course, our former First Lady, Jenny Sanford. Thank you so much for your time this evening. No major surprise tonight, but what do you think about the results, especially the fact that we heard them calling this race right at the top of the hour, right when polls close? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure I heard the question. What do I think about them calling it right when the polls close?
Yes.
Yeah, I wish they had waited longer, but I get it. They did exit polls. And, I mean, the press has been putting out there for a long time that it's a 30-point spread. So, I'm just hoping right now that we really beat those expectations and narrow that gap. I'd love to see it be less than 20 points.
Haley has said that she will not drop out tonight, and she's pushing forward to Super Tuesday. What do you think voters, not just here in South Carolina, but across the country in those 20-something states that will vote on March 5th, what do you think they need to know about her so that they could throw their support behind her?
I think voters everywhere need to know that Nikki is a genuine, honest, heartfelt woman who cares about America and wants to run for president to make this country a better place. She's the real deal. She's doing what she believes in, and she's got my support as long as she's in the race. I will continue to work for her. I will continue to support her. We saw her in South Carolina as a governor. She was an incredible governor. There was no drama. And you know what? Our country's been filled with drama in the political world. There were no drama. There was no scandals. She kept our taxes low. Our economy was booming. She got our Confederate flag down. She would fix our immigration problems. She would boost our economy. She would improve our education and reform our school system. You know, she is the right woman to lead us to the next century, and she is a uniter. She's not a divider. There's a reason people are so fervent about her. And she's running against a former president. For her to get 40% today is huge. The big question we should be asking ourselves is, why is Donald Trump, a former president, letting somebody else get that much of the vote? What is it about him that doesn't unite the party the way he should be?
That is the interesting thing. She hasn't won any races yet. That is the interesting thing. She hasn't won any races yet, but the funding is coming in, and the people are following her on the bus tours. What does she need to do to really solidify support moving forward? Some may say that it's telling that she couldn't carry her own state where she served for 2 terms, but what should she do to really solidify the American vote moving forward?
I think she needs to keep getting her message out there. I think the press needs to start taking her more seriously and not present the race like it's a done deal, because it's not a done deal. Looking today, you would see in South Carolina an ultra-conservative, very Trump-heavy state. If she gets Senator vote in the state, people should be taking her seriously, because she is the alternative that many in our country are yearning for. The people that have stopped voting in the Republican primaries are coming to vote for her. People who are solid conservatives and know her record, want to continue to support her. And I hope she stays in as long as she can afford to.
All right. Former First Lady Jenny Sanford, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was Felicia Edie with former First Lady Jenny Sanford there in Charleston at Nikki Haley's watch party. We still have not heard from the former governor yet, but we expect to soon. Of course, polls have only been closed for almost an hour now. Of course, we already know that the Associated Press called this race for former President Donald Trump. I'm in studio with Scott Huffman from Winthrop University. Scott, you just heard from the former First Lady, too. She was there in the state, leading the state with her husband, Mark Sanford, who was governor at the time. She was talking about Nikki Haley being an actual Republican there, talking about her track record. Talk to people about what Nikki Haley was like in 2010 and when her reelection in 2014. You know, in this race, I've been hearing a lot of people call her a moderate. You see Donald Trump call her a Democrat, or his supporters calling her a Democrat or backed by Democrats. Who is Nikki Haley?
Well, first off, let's just recognize, what an amazing advocate for Nikki Haley Jenny Sanford was. She hit every talking point darn near perfectly. And it was, everything that a Haley spokesperson could hope for. Looking back at Nikki Haley, her evolution is absolutely anything but that of a moderate. She was a relatively unknown member of the legislature. She's running for the Republican nomination for governor in 2010, 4th out of 4. But she gets the endorsement of Sarah Palin, the ultimate queen of the Tea Party. And she rockets forward to the front of the pack, ends up winning a runoff, again, against a traditional Republican. So she really rides the Tea Party wave into the governor's mansion. But she is actually not that well known at the time. Obviously, South Carolina is a Republican plus 10 state. She won that election by less than 5, right? By 4. Now, 4 years later, she runs against the exact same candidate, and at that point, she wins by 14.
Yep.
So South Carolinians had come to know her, they'd come to like her, and she was very popular among the Tea Party with one minor exception in the fall of 2011. Ben Carson was a Tea Party favorite at the time. Folks may remember Ben Carson. He was ahead of Mitt Romney, and she endorsed Mitt Romney and very briefly upset the Tea Party, but they came back because all of her policies were along the line of the Tea Party. One exception that Jenny Sanford pointed out was about the Confederate flag. When she was running for governor, she spoke to the Sons of Confederate Veterans and said she had no intention of moving the Confederate flag. But after the Mother Emanuel massacre and overwhelming public support for moving that flag, she agreed to it. And that, of course, angered a few in her base. But in general, she governed as a staunch conservative, and really kept that Tea Party energy going even as it began to evolve. It broke up a little bit for lack of clear organization, but it re-solidified under the MAGA movement.
And Scott, we were talking about too this past week, Nikki Haley talking about the Alabama Supreme Court decision about personhood and IVF, and her really saying that an embryo is a person, is an actual baby, if you will. Was that something that could really reemphasize to her Republican base that, hey, I am still a red meat Republican, but maybe also flag some Democrats as, oh, right, she is not maybe what I think would be a moderate?
Yeah, I'm not sure of the strategic reasoning behind that. She did seem to walk it back. Looking at, how many families have used in vitro fertilization and, how many frozen embryos there are, to say that that is a child and, somebody ought to be able to be sued for the death of, an embryo, which is what this case was about. May signal the Republican Party that, hey, I am a strong pro-life, but you have to remember, rank and file Republicans, again and again and again, when they are polled, a majority of them still want some type of legal abortion. Now, it may only be under the case of rape or incest, or it may only be under the health of the mother, but cutting it off completely, which any personhood bill would do, they're not fully behind that. But you could argue she is signaling to those hardcore Republicans. But as you pointed out, she was hoping for a lot of crossover voting in this election. She was hoping for Democrats to show up. When she basically came out with a personhood argument, she better hope that none of those Democrats were listening, otherwise they would not be voting for her.
And we've seen the Democrats, the Democratic leaders in our state, especially hitting the airwaves recently, saying like, this is actually Nikki Haley who she is. We're not here to rescue her, et cetera. And we're talking about abortion. You were mentioning some numbers there. We saw AP Votecast talk about abortion, saying just over 1 in 10 South Carolina Republican voters say the procedure should be banned in all cases. So again, a very extreme stance there in South Carolina. We have 6-week abortion ban in place, and we'll be seeing how that plays out there in the general election itself. And it's worth noting, Scott, we were talking about Nikki Haley's ascension in 2010 when she became governor. She became that Republican gubernatorial candidate, beating out that field that included then State Attorney General Henry McMaster. We saw Lieutenant Governor Andre Bauer, Congressman Gresham Barrett, and State Representative Nikki Haley. And she blasted all of them, almost won it outright, 49%, didn't have that 50%, had to go to a runoff with Gresham Barrett, who I just saw introduce her in Clemson the other day.
And he has become a fan. He has become a supporter. And that contest at the time was, really the Republican quote unquote establishment versus the Tea Party. And that's how it was played up and that's how it played out. But it's so fascinating now to see that Gresham Barrett firmly in Camp Haley.
Yeah, definitely. And we're approaching the top of the hour here, and I just want to go ahead and revisit for folks that this is South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio's live coverage of election night, the South Carolina presidential primary here in the state. And after an hour, after polls have been closed for an hour, we know the Associated Press has already called the race for former President Donald Trump, who beat former Governor Nikki Haley in her home state here. The fourth contest that the former president has won so far in the nominating process as we head to the White House this November. I'm here on set with Scott Huffman from Winthrop University, and we have reporters out in the field at Trump and Haley watch parties. We'll be talking to them shortly, but we also heard from Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette earlier today. She was actually on stage with a lot of other dignitaries with President Donald Trump, but she was right there next to Governor McMaster too. And we're going to hear from Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette right now, who spoke with one of our reporters.
We're here with the Lieutenant Governor, Pamela Evette. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me up to chit chat.
Absolutely. You've been an early supporter of former President Donald Trump. Can you explain why is he so popular amongst South Carolina Republican voters here?
You know, I've been a supporter since 2015, like you said, long before I was Lieutenant Governor. And right now, I think people are supporting him because they know what he can do. They love his policies, and you can't have Donald Trump policies without Donald Trump. And they're scared. You know, we have an invasion at our southern border, 11 million illegal immigrants in our country. We saw what happened in Georgia with that nursing student who was murdered. And, you know, parents are fearful. And, you know, now when you have to decide if you're going to buy gas or buy groceries, it's something else you start to think about. These are issues that are affecting people in their homes. And that's why they're looking to the leadership that's proven.
And that's a good segue. I wanted to ask, what are the issues that drove you to vote for former President Donald Trump today?
So again, I've been supporting him long before I was Lieutenant Governor, and it's when I was a business person. My husband and I have a national company, and I wanted to see government run more like a business, some accountability, and so it drew me toward President Trump. And then when I saw what he did, how he, you know, kind of had strength, he was changing things around. And we saw historic highs on the stock market. Gas prices were going down, down, down. People's bank accounts were going up. And that's what people are longing for. You know, it's only been 3 short years. So people are wanting to go back to that level of comfort they had.
You've done a lot of traveling around the states, talking to various Republican groups. What are you hearing from Republican voters in the state that are top concerns that they have?
So everybody's worried about, again, prices going up. You know, there was a great article that got published that said, you know, it used to be just 4 short years ago, if you earned $70,000 a year, you could look at buying that starter home, that first home. Now you have to look at making $130,000 to $140,000 a year to buy that same home. That's almost double in 4 years. So what's happening is the American dream is getting further and further away from everybody, and it's scaring people. So they want it to come back. They want to see change. They know President Trump can do it. He's been there before. And they don't want somebody learning on the job because we have way too much at stake and our world is in disarray.
All polling has suggested that Trump is going to pull it off here tonight. What is your message to former Governor Nikki Haley? She said that she's going to run in the Super Tuesday states, but do you think that she should bow out tonight?
You know, I never tell anybody what they should do, but my hope is that all Republicans come together. South Carolina has always been the road to the White House. I suspect highly that's going to be the same tonight. And so let's get behind who we know the nominee is going to be. Let's stop beating up each other in our own party. Let's work together. Let's take back the White House. Let's take the Senate. And let's make sure we get more seats in the House so that we can turn this country around. We don't have a lot of time. I mean, so let's all work together. That's my message to all Republicans. You know, at the end of the day, if whoever wins our nomination isn't who you were initially pulling for, this is bigger than any one of us, right? We stand behind our nominee and we work really hard to get him in the White House.
Thank you so much for chatting with us, Lieutenant Governor. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And that was Maayan Schechter there speaking with Lieutenant Governor Pamela Evette. I'm Gavin Jackson in studio with Scott Huffman from Winthrop University. And Scott, we just heard from Lieutenant Governor talking about this need to unify behind Donald Trump. She's obviously backing Donald Trump. She was on stage with him. Talking about time to back him. I mean, if Nikki Haley continued on through Super Tuesday, through the month of March, and then maybe dropped out at some point, I mean, does that really hurt Donald Trump's chances of attacking Biden the way he would normally attack him? I mean, we have already seen him running like a general election candidate already. What's the difference there?
No, you know, honestly, it wouldn't make a difference in how he campaigns. He's campaigning as an angry pugilist, you know, who always attacks his opponents. He's airing a lot of grievances, and as he does that, he is, you know, sort of channeling the feelings of a lot of his supporters who are feeling like they're losing power within their own country. And so he's seen as a fighter for them. And whether he's doing it mostly at Biden and occasionally at Nikki Haley is not going to change the way they look at him. And I will say there was something that the Lieutenant Governor said that I found very interesting is you can't have Donald Trump policies without Donald Trump. Yes, you can. You can have, you know, policies of all kinds, but it speaks to how strongly this party has become enraptured with his personality and how he is now driving the party rather than the other way around.
It's interesting because a lot of people talk to me, they ask me, what about the policies? What about the policies? Well, it's not so much about the policies, it is about the personality, because a lot of times there is not much light between both Nikki Haley and Donald Trump on certain policies, except foreign policy. Of course, we're looking at what's going on in Ukraine. It's the 2-year anniversary of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and we only hear Nikki Haley talking about that essentially because it's become kind of a hot topic. Even Lindsey Graham not voting for that aid package in Congress because Donald Trump didn't want that aid package passed. So it's fascinating to see that, especially when we saw what happened in Russia recently with the death of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who is in custody there. We heard Nikki Haley coming out hard against Vladimir Putin, the Russian president. She said Alexei Navalny was a hero. She talks about Evan Gersovich, who's a Wall Street Journal reporter, who is still in custody in Russia, almost a year now. We don't hear that from the other side. How fascinating is that to you to hear that when we talk about where this party came from under Ronald Reagan to where we are right now?
Well, again, with the America First movement, the party has started to become much more isolationist than it was, definitely under Reagan and under George W. Bush. And in that sense, Nikki Haley is, much more in the model of someone who wants to project America's strength around the world, which, in the post-World War II era, we've done that. We have been the superpower. We have used our position in NATO to help project that power and keep Russia in check. And, to have the party of Reagan, who called out the evil empire of the Soviet Union, now essentially not opposing Putin, some of them actually supporting him, not stopping an invasion from Russia into Europe. That is a different party than used to exist.
Okay, and thank you, Scott, for that. We're going to go to Maayan Schechter, who is here in Columbia with 1st Congressional District Representative Nancy Mace. Maayan, what's going on there? How's the representative doing?
How are you doing, Congresswoman?
We're doing great tonight. Another night, another historic victory for Donald Trump.
What do you think tonight's victory, not just the fact that he won by huge margins, but the race was called at 7-701. What does that say about the race right now?
Well, it shows that he is the presumptive nominee, and it says that we all need to rally behind him. There is no path for anybody else in this race. He's going to win every state across the country, and we need to unite behind Donald Trump as our nominee.
Nikki Haley, of course, has said that she's going to go run in the Super Tuesday states. I mean, do you think she should drop out tonight? What's your message to her?
Look, I like Nikki Haley. I respect her as a woman. I respected her and liked her as our governor and former ambassador. But the country loves Donald Trump. This is his time. He's battle-tested on the issues like immigration and the border. He's right on the women's issues as well and fiscal policy. And so he's who Republican primary voters are overwhelmingly supporting, and that's who we're rallying behind tonight.
When you were talking to your constituents, other people out in the community, what are the issues that they said are driving them to the polls in this election year?
Number one, the border and illegal immigration. What Joe Biden has done to destroy our nation with over 8 million or so illegals coming into this country, pouring into this country because he's allowed a wide open border, that's number one. Number two, inflation in the economy is still hurting working families. They want our taxes lowered. They want groceries to cost less. They want gas to cost less. And then third, women's issues. If we don't tackle this Alabama ruling and make sure that every woman across the country has access to IVF treatment, we gotta tackle women's issues too.
How do you feel Trump's response to the Alabama Supreme Court ruling has been?
He came out forcefully last night in Rock Hill against it, and that is wonderful. I talked about it all this week, how we need to make sure that every woman across the state and across the nation has access to IVF, and it was great to hear that he agrees.
And do you feel like other Republicans are starting to follow suit? Do you think they need to be more outspoken like you and the former president?
I hope like hell they are, because it's a huge issue. And women's issues matter, especially in purple states and in purple districts. We've got to be able to talk about why our policies are more compassionate than the left's. You want to talk about limitations on abortion. The left doesn't have any limitations, and they won't admit it or talk about it. They just skirt around the issue where most people are saying second trimester, whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. We need to talk about that.
What's next for you? I know you're obviously up for re-election. Are you going to be hitting the stump for Trump and other groups?
I would love to continue that conversation and stump, particularly in swing states, particularly in swing districts, because I represent a purple district. I know the issue of border. I know the issue of the economy and women's issues. I've been talking about this stuff for a very long time, and I want to help our candidates, including Donald Trump, win big in November.
Well, this is 1st District Congresswoman Nancy Mace. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Back to you, Gavin.
It's a great report there from Ian Schechter with 1st Congressional District Representative Nancy Mace. I'm in the studio here with Scott Huffman. We're going to get some latest numbers here because they're still coming in. Polls have been closed for more than an hour now, with Donald Trump leading Nikki Haley by about 15 points there. Of course, it's still very early, but Scott, 15 points, not too bad.
That's not bad. A lot of that is some of the early voting and things that are coming in. And so, you know, what folks need to pay attention to is where these votes are coming from. And you and I talked about this earlier. There are certain counties that are going to be not only extremely populous, so they're going to have large numbers, they are going to be overwhelmingly Trump. And so that's just going to sort of change the calculus. The official numbers that come in, you know, again, they're going to be trickling in, so we could see that lead increase by a lot. But if it doesn't, if it stays within that 15%, then again, that goes against the argument that the pro-Trump side saying is, oh, we blew her out of the water and she needs to get out of the race right now. It helps her argument that, hey, she can do better than expected and she has a good chance at Super Tuesday. Now, most polls aren't showing that, but that's not going to stop her from making the argument if she has a loss that's merely in the teens.
And we just heard Ian Schechter talking to Nancy Mace from the 1st Congressional District there. Interesting relationship, interesting trajectory Nancy Mace has had since getting into Congress there. Just 2 years ago, Trump endorsed Mace's primary challenger Katie Arrington, but Mace went on to beat Katie by 8 points because Arrington had lost that district to Joe Cunningham, making it a Democratic district before. This all happened after Katie Arrington challenged Mark Sanford, who had that job, and really made that district into more of a purple district. But of course, redistricting has changed the makeup of that district as well. We're still waiting for a U.S. Supreme Court decision on that. But tell me what you see in terms of Nancy Mace and her relationship with Trump, what she's trying to do right now, because she does have two primary challengers this June. Catherine Templeton, who ran for governor, and then also Mace's former chief of staff, Dan Hanlon. I mean, what does that say to you when your own people are running against you?
Well, you know, again, she also has a fraught relationship with Trump, as you pointed out. And she, you know, one of the, I think, famous things is after Trump endorses her opponent, she goes and stands and does selfies in front of Trump Tower, showing that, you know, despite Trump not showing her love, she loves Trump. So again, this has gone back and forth. I am desperately interested on seeing how that primary plays out when her own former chief of staff is against her. The question is, will he and Templeton divide the anti-Mace vote? But she is fighting in a district that could end up looking different than the district she's won in the past. And if that happens, that speaks all the more to her, you know, what you just heard her say, talking about, I need to talk about purple issues, I need to talk about women's issues and things like that. But it's very interesting. Her path in Congress has definitely been an interesting thing to follow with the turnover in her office, you know, not a few scandals here and there, but it has been interesting to follow, and she will definitely be pining for Trump's endorsement come her reelection time.
Yeah, we heard her on stage with Trump in North Charleston on February 14th. Probably one endorsement she won't be getting is from Nikki Haley. I don't know if she wants that endorsement, but she wanted it last go around because Nikki Haley did endorse her for the 2022 race, 2023. Yeah, I'm trying to think of my years here. And she raised money for her. She raised $300,000 for her. Nikki Haley cut an ad for Nancy Mace. And then all of a sudden, like Tim Scott, things kind of go out the window when we're talking about Donald Trump here. Things change with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is you know, Nikki Haley is very good at raising money. She raised money for Mace. Donald Trump is great at raising money, but only for Donald Trump. And so, you know, whether or not she gets any largesse from his fundraising, you know, I doubt that there'll be a whole lot given out. I mean, you know, of course, the Congress itself, the leadership PACs, the 527s, are going to help her out. The bigger question is going to be, what about the National Republican Committee, which is out of money itself and has, you know, the Laura Trump has said if, you know, she gets in there, literally every penny is going to go to re-electing Donald Trump.
And what I saw, I think I saw a tweet about the RNC is looking to pass possibly a resolution where it would prohibit them from being able to spend that kind of money for Donald Trump's legal bills and the like, or fines. But also, I mean, at different times too, because we are seeing the change of the Republican National Committee in favor of Donald Trump, right, with Laura Trump and his advisor, Chris LaCivita, going in there as well to do operations while also still being on the campaign. So really just...
And Whatley from North Carolina.
And Whatley from North Carolina, who he was mentioning, who was on stage with him there too, much to the, the demise, I guess, of Drew McKissick, our state party chairman, who's a national co-chair with Ronna McDaniel being the chairman right now. So really just a huge change there for the RNC. What's the read there, Scott? Is it just to really gear up and really prevent any possible contested convention? Not that that is a possibility.
It's a consolidation of power. I mean, it's clearly, you certainly don't want a contested convention. I can't see Nikki Haley doing that. That would just tarnish her image with Republicans so incredibly much. But, you got to cover all your bases. And as Trump is consolidating support with every type of Republican, and again, one of the things about South Carolina is we had every flavor of Republican. And so you saw, people like Mike Huckabee come in and only focus on the upstate, where the evangelicals were, and his wife go to the ladies' tea party up there. And, and you had Mitt Romney come in focusing on, with business people in the Midlands and the Low Country. Well, now all of that has changed. It has consolidated behind Trump, and this move at the national party level is an extension of that.
Scott, we have some new numbers we're going to look at here too, as the polls had closed an hour and 15 minutes ago. You see that lead there also growing for former President Trump, 19 points, 59% to Nikki Haley at 40%. So we're moving up to that 20% category at this point. Obviously, it's still very early.
Do we know how many, what percentage of precincts
I
are
would
reporting?
like to see. Let me see. I can pop online. And I think it's about 30% of the results are in right now. So you're seeing about a 20% margin there between Trump and Haley, with 30% of the results in. So still early, but we were also talking about early voting a moment ago, Scott, and we saw more than 205,000 votes cast early now that we have true early voting in South Carolina. The top two counties, Horry County and Greenville County. Talk to us about those two counties and the differences there and the importance of them.
Well, and it's I'll be interested to see if the support for Trump in Horry and Greenville is fundamentally different from those who voted early versus those who voted in person, because both of those areas have tended to be, at least within the party structure, very strong bases for Donald Trump. And when the early vote first came in, it looked a lot closer between Haley and Trump, and so I don't know how many of those votes were counted. But on to something Drew McKissick did point out. There were more people who early voted in the Republican primary than everybody who voted in the Democratic presidential primary. Now, technically it was contested. Really, effectively, it wasn't. Only about a quarter as many Democrats turned out in 2024 as turned out for the presidential primary in 2020. But that was an overwhelming number of early voting that came in for the Republicans, and the in-person voting could, again, as McKissick pointed out, begin to approach records. I mean, we'll have to see, and that would be surprising given how tiny the field really is.
So clear that there's plenty of enthusiasm out there right now, even though, we're talking about Donald Trump winning this race. It was already expected for him to win this race, but still a lot of enthusiasm out there. But we're going to go to Talisha Edie right now, who is at Nikki Haley's watch party in Charleston. Talisha, what do you have for us?
Gavin, standing here with Tiffany James, who we usually talk to on the Democratic side of the election process, but you played a unique role in this process. Tell us a little bit about your current role with the Super PAC primary pivot.
So I am the South Carolina Senior Advisor for Primary Pivot.
Earlier this week, you guys had a press event at the State House. You wanted the messaging that organization was trying to get out to Democrats and independents, people eligible to vote in the Republican primary, to cast their vote for Nikki Haley. Explain the messaging behind that and the purpose behind that messaging.
Yes, our whole purpose is to preserve and protect our democracy. And we want to do that by any means necessary. So if that means that you're a Democrat or an independent that's never voted in the Republican primary, you had an opportunity tonight to vote for Haley against Donald Trump, not because you love Haley, but because you are for a pro-democracy candidate.
Concerned that folks who would normally not vote in the Republican primary, any concerns that their action in doing so would hurt who they would normally vote for, President Biden, further down the road as we get closer to November?
This actually helps President Biden, because the longer she stays in the race, the more it damages Trump, the more it drains his resources, the more he has an opportunity to say something really ridiculous in order for people to doubt him. So this gives President Biden and his team time to build resources and to come up with a strategy in order to win against Donald Trump, because we know he's going to be the nominee eventually.
We just had a conversation with former First Lady Jenny Sanford, and she said Nikki Haley needs to continue her messaging moving forward, and we believe she'll do that. She said she's not going to drop out of the race. She's going to push through into Super Tuesday. But she also said that people and the media need to start taking her more seriously. When you were on the ground working with Primary Pivot, what were you hearing from Democrats and independents? How were they falling when it came to how they would cast their ballots, if they cast one at all?
No, absolutely. A lot of people were skeptical about Haley, and I would tell them this is not about her. This is about the future of our country. This is about whether or not you will be able to vote in 2028. And if Trump is our president, then that is highly likely that we won't be able to vote in 2028. If she or President Biden is our president, we will still have our democracy, and we'll be able to vote Haley out if she wins and vote for a candidate that we do like.
What's been the reaction from Democrats, Republicans, and what do things look like for you guys moving forward?
Well, the reaction from Republicans haven't been the best reactions, but for Haley voters, there have been wonderful reactions. They understand that it takes the general public to vote for a candidate of this United States of America, not just a certain subset of America. So they've been excited. Democrats, some Democrats were not favorable of it, but after we talked to Democrats about, our purpose, about how our democracy matters, how our ancestors, specifically Black Democrats, how our ancestors fought to keep this democracy alive, they start to understand it, and they start to believe that they too can help make this union perfect and help us become a more perfect nation, keeping our democracy intact.
All right, Tiffany James, thank you so much. I'm not going to hold you. I'm going to let you enjoy the wonderful music, the loud music. Gavin, back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. I've heard that playlist many times over the past few weeks and past few months. We saw Nikki Haley in Iowa, New Hampshire, and on the trail here in South Carolina. Scott, I want to ask you, talking about the Democrats, talking about moderates voting for Nikki Haley. We talked about how she was always a Republican, very strong Republican. But why, as a Democrat, would a person vote for Nikki Haley if she's the strongest person to run against Joe Biden this fall?
Yeah, and that is, it's something that is a double-edged sword strategically. You've got to think short-term and long-term. On the one hand, a Democrat who, shows up to vote for Nikki Haley absolutely is not voting for Nikki Haley. They're voting against Donald Trump. They don't want Nikki Haley to be president. But as you pointed out, some polls are showing her having a better shot against Joe Biden. That says to me that they are desperately afraid of another Trump presidency, and that as much as they, dislike Haley, and your average Democrat is not a huge fan of Nikki Haley because she was so conservative as a Republican governor, that says that they were more willing to accept a Haley presidency than a Trump presidency. So that really kind of talks to the level of fear among Democrats of another Trump presidency.
And we haven't heard from the former governor yet. We know the polls have been closed for almost an hour and a half now. The Associated Press called the race for former President Donald Trump shortly thereafter, and we already heard from the former president here in Columbia, so we're waiting to hear from former Governor Haley. But before we do that, Scott, I want to ask you just about that path forward for Haley at this point. There's going to be more pressure for her to drop out. She's already said she's not going to do that. She's going to go forward. What does she need to do in this speech tonight to really, I guess, maybe shore up people, keep the money coming, get people turned out in these early voting states that she's going to hit?
Well, she has always been one to, have speeches where she shows defiance. and she challenges others, and she's fond of saying, I like being underestimated, and a lot of people have underestimated Haley to their own detriment.
Yeah.
And so if she intends on going forward, I think she's going to have to strike a note of defiance and say, I still need to be in this to give people a real choice. And I think she'll continue the message of we're not crowning anybody. So if she does not withdraw tonight, if she keeps her promise of staying in the race, I think she'll have to strike a note of defiance in order to keep that fundraising coming.
But Scott, when we talk about a hypothetical matchup between Nikki Haley and Joe Biden, how she continues to say that she'd be the strongest candidate against Joe Biden, what happens to that polling if Donald Trump was to have a running mate like Senator Tim Scott, South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, too many eyes. But what needs to happen there? Does that change the calculus? Does that change that polling if you have someone like Tim Scott out there who is rah Donald Trump?
Normally I would say at this stage, in the American Republic, the vice president doesn't matter as much. But you know what? We saw with Joe Biden picking Kamala Harris that angered and upset a lot of Republicans. Mm-hmm. So that vice presidential choice is actually maybe becoming relevant again. Early on in our republic, picking a vice president who either ideologically balanced you or balanced you with another part of the country where you weren't running strong was absolutely critical. And then we got to where the position essentially didn't matter. We're seeing it become relevant again, although, Trump is definitely not going to pick somebody who would outshine him. Mm-hmm. He is definitely going to pick a strong cheerleader, but not somebody that people are going to say, hey, I'm actually voting for the vice president.
Which is why I never would have thought Nikki Haley would have been a vice presidential pick, and that's really been solidified over these past few weeks. We're still waiting to hear from the former governor at her watch party in Charleston. But Scott, we have some data from AP VoteCast, which is essentially exit polling. Mm-hmm. We saw that's how the AP was so quick to call the race tonight. And one of the questions they were asking voters here in South Carolina, the 2,300 Republican voters they talked to, was about Trump's investigations and these criminal trials that will be going forward. We're talking about voter interference. We're talking about him having those classified documents in Florida, as well as other cases against him. And we're going to see stuff going forward in later March. Does Nikki Haley stay in this race essentially to be the sounding board, to balance back against Donald Trump going forward in these cases that are going to trial? And she can say, hey, look at what's going on. He's focused on these cases instead of the American country and the people.
And he won't, this is why he can't beat Biden. And that would be the argument she would have to make. The problem for her is that by the time this all comes about, he will have already claimed the nomination. His supporters look at these cases, and you're right. I mean, he's been losing, but they've been civil cases. This is a criminal case we're now talking about. And his followers see this as persecution, just like they themselves believe that they are persecuted. And to give you an example, look at his strong support among evangelicals. In the 2014, 2015, evangelicals were not behind thrice divorced, bankruptcies, casinos, Donald Trump. They didn't see him as a godly man. Now they are overwhelmingly behind him. And it's not because they suddenly see him as a godly man. It's because they see somebody who they think will fight for them. Mm-hmm. And you can justify it biblically by saying, hey, look, God chose imperfect people. David had his mistress's husband murdered. Saul persecuted Christians before he became Paul. Joshua challenged God, when he was called. So, you can justify it biblically, even if you don't think that Trump is a godly man. Mm-hmm. So you look at how the evangelicals have lined up because he is somebody who will fight for them, because more and more evangelicals are feeling persecuted. Mm-hmm. They are feeling like, oh, America is no longer going to be a Christian nation unless we elect somebody like Trump. So the trials and all this that Trump is spinning as, can't you see I'm being persecuted? That only solidifies his support among his core supporters and will get them more fired up. That's what we've seen. The more charges that are lined up against him, the more support he's getting among his supporters. But to your point, what is it actually going to do about his electability, and what will Nikki Haley be able to say about it, depending on whether or not and when she pulls out of the race.
Yeah, we're going to hear from the former governor momentarily, but I want to talk about this AP vote cast question that they asked, and they said about 3/4 of South Carolina voters say that charges against Trump are political attempts to undermine him rather than legitimate attempts to enforce the law. And that's similar to what we saw in Iowa and New Hampshire as well. But however, 4 in 10 have at least some concerns that Trump is too extreme to win the general election. So still a little worried about what could happen in November. So you're going to be talking about abortion issues. You're going to be talking about legal issues. Do you think people have really grasped just how unique of a situation our country is going to be in as this year progresses?
Well, I think that a lot of folks are deeply concerned because they are feeling that, we are getting to existential crisis level. After January 6th, I didn't think I could be surprised any more than I was about what was an attack on the heart of our democracy. But what we have seen is, that instance has been turned into, oh, these were heroes, these were fighting, and that narrative has changed so much. It made me realize that, you know what? I need to get in deeper and make sure that I'm understanding the existential crisis.
Sorry, Scott, we have to go to Charleston, where former Governor Nikki Haley is taking the stage right now. This is about an hour and a half after the Associated Press called the race for former President Donald Trump and polls closed. So you hear that walkout song. We're about to hear from the former governor. Let's see what she has to say. It seems like a pretty rowdy crowd there in Charleston.
But I love that about you. Thank you. I want to start off obviously thanking my family. I am so incredibly blessed. I was able to speak with Michael this morning. His support has been amazing. The kids have really stepped up, sometimes too much, but they have stepped up in a way that has made me so, so proud. I am blessed because I had the ability to actually go vote today with my mom. And there's something very special with the fact that she was a lawyer in India and she was named one of the first female judges. And because of the times, she was never able to sit on the bench. But the fact that she could go with me and cast her ballot for her daughter as President of the United States was an amazing honor. I want to thank my parents who taught me strength and grace. I want to thank Michael's parents who have been unbelievably supportive through all of this. And I want to thank my brothers and my sister and their families for always supporting us every step of the way. Thank you. I feel blessed tonight. I've felt blessed through this entire journey. Even when it's been tough, I haven't lost sight of that. I've felt God's strength and grace every step of the way. I'm blessed to have served the state that raised me. And I look forward to continuing to be blessed to serve the state that raised me, whether it's going and voting with my mom or whether it is being with our family. We're very grateful for the good people of South Carolina. Thank you. And it's a blessing to know that across our sweet state, everyone wants to bring back the America we know and love. That's the underlying message of what happened today. I want to congratulate Donald Trump on his victory. And I want to thank the people of South Carolina for using the power of your voice. No matter the results, I love the people of our state. I love what we accomplished together, and I love how we united during our worst challenges and tragedies. I've always seen our state as a family. Families are honest with each other. They say the hard truths. That's what I've done this entire campaign. And that's what I'll do now. What I saw today was South Carolina's frustration with our country's direction. I've seen that same frustration nationwide. I share it. I feel it to my core. I couldn't be more worried about America. It seems like our country is falling apart. But here's the thing. America will come apart if we make the wrong choices. This has never been about me or my political future. We need to beat Joe Biden in November. I don't believe Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden. Nearly every day, Trump drives people away, including with his comments just yesterday. Today in South Carolina, we're getting around 40% of the vote. That's about what we got in New Hampshire, too. I'm going to count it. I know 40% is not 50%. But I also know 40% is not some tiny group. There are huge numbers of voters in our Republican primaries who are saying they want an alternative. I said earlier this week that no matter what happens in South Carolina, I would continue to run for president. I'm a woman of my word. I'm not giving up this fight when a majority of Americans disapprove of both Donald Trump and Joe Biden. South Carolina has spoken. We're the fourth state to do so. In the next 10 days, another 21 states and territories will speak. They have the right to a real choice. Not a Soviet-style election with only one candidate. And I have a duty to give them that choice. We can't afford 4 more years of Biden's failures or Trump's lack of focus. We're at $34 trillion in debt and counting. Not even a third of our 8th graders are proficient in reading. Families can't afford groceries. 9 million illegals have come to our border with enough fentanyl to kill every single American. And beyond our borders, the world is on fire. War is spreading further every day. If we aren't strong, those wars will draw America further in. And it's not just about policies. We won't get out of our downward spiral if we keep obsessing over the past. Does anyone seriously think Joe Biden or Donald Trump will unite our country to solve our problems? One of them calls his fellow Americans fascists. The other calls his fellow Americans vermin. They aren't fighting for our country's future. They're demanding we fight each other. The younger generation, my children's generation, knows it better than anyone. They deserve better. They deserve leadership. And so I will keep fighting for them and for you and for all of America. From the start of this campaign, I have made clear that I'm running for president to save America. I'm running to remind us what it means to be an American. In the America I know and love, we believe in each other. And we believe in America's inherent goodness. Now is the time to renew that belief. Now is the time to remember who we are. We're citizens of the greatest country in human history. And we must lead now more than ever before. I'm grateful to South Carolina. I always have been and I always will be. And I'm grateful that today is not the end of our story. We're headed to Michigan tomorrow. And we're headed to the Super Tuesday states throughout all of next week. We'll keep fighting for America, and we won't rest until America wins. I want to give a few thank yous because we have had some people who've really, there have been too many to thank, but I really have to single out Congressman Ralph Norman. Ralph has had pressure on him from every side that he needed to not support me and that he needed to step away from me. And he always said, there's no way in hell. I want to thank Senator Tom Davis, Representative Nathan Ballantyne, and Representative Mike Neese, who were there. We had other supporters, but they were constantly there. Tom, you've been there from the very beginning. Nathan, you'll forever be my desk mate. Mike, I won't know what to do if I don't see you at an event, but I am truly, truly grateful. Solicitors Scarlett Wilson and Duffy Stone, amazing rock stars for our state that we should all be proud of. Mayor Brenda Bethune really stepped up. The mayor of Myrtle Beach, she was absolutely fantastic. Former Congressman Gresham Barrett. You know, the story behind me and Gresham is we duked it out in our first primary when I ran for governor. And to have him call me and say, not only do I want to help you, I will do whatever you need me to do. Gresham, thank you for the prayers. Thank you for the text. Thank you for the encouragement. I am grateful for that. And everybody needs a friend like Bubba Cromer. when you have a friend who was one of the first ones to greet me when I joined the House of Representatives, and when everybody wasn't nice and they gave me a hard time, Bubba would always compliment my outfit. And to have you show up and go to every event and print thousands of letters and stuff mailboxes and do the things you didn't have to do. We all love you. Thank you. And to my women for Nikki. For Nikki chapters in every state in this country. And if you want to talk about a force, don't mess with the women in America. Thank you for the support, the encouragement, the love, everything that you've given. Thank you, South Carolina. Thank you to everybody who's been here today. Onward. Thank you. God bless you.
That was former Governor Nikki Haley there giving her speech there in Charleston. Of course, she is coming in second place here in this two-person race with Donald Trump being named the winner of the South Carolina presidential primary right after polls closed at 7 o'clock. We heard from him earlier in the 7 o'clock hour, and that was Nikki Haley down there in Charleston. Scott, we were talking earlier about Nikki Haley, and you said that she had to be defiant to really go forward. She says, onward, we're still going forward. Super Tuesday, Michigan before that. Was she defiant enough there in that speech?
I think she struck a good balance. She was tough on Donald Trump. She, explained that he was not a uniter, that he was a divider. She hit that hard, but she also, in the end, came through with some very personal thank yous that, as I believe you pointed out, were very different than Trump's, calling and pointing on the stage. And she came through as very authentic. You are calling it a two-person race. I don't think you're taking into account the 316 votes for Chris Christie, but we're there. But she did strike, I think, a note of defiance. The explanation of why she feels she has to go forward. So her justification, she made it. Our only question is how much of a loss. She hinted that it was only a 20-point loss at the time. We only have 9 out of 46 counties reporting so far. So we don't know how big that gap's going to be.
And we have some results we can bring to you right now. With 53% of the results in, we are looking at Nikki Haley behind Donald Trump by, again, solid 20 points there, kind of maintaining that lead there for Donald Trump over Nikki Haley. Scott, another thing that we heard from the former governor talk about was that America will come apart if we make the wrong choices. Kind of what you're talking about there earlier. And that's kind of a contrast to what we heard from Donald Trump saying in his speech, where he even asked Governor Henry McMaster, can we move up Election Day? Do you have any control over that? The governor doesn't have control over that. No one has control of that. But quite the different contrast there in those speeches like we were talking about.
Yeah, and of course we've all heard the story where Donald Trump said, "Oh, I'll only be a dictator on day one." And again, with his isolationist attitudes, America's place in the world, is going to fundamentally change if he becomes president. And, Nikki Haley is pointing out that she disagrees with everything that Joe Biden is doing too. So, she has made the argument on domestic and foreign policy that either of those choices is going to cause the country to come apart. It seems now it's not a particularly hopeful message that she's giving, but it is, enough for her to continue to go forward and justify why she's still in the race.
Yeah, she's talking about 21 states over the next 10 days. Super Tuesday, obviously a big one with 874 delegates there in play. When we get further into March 12th, March 19th, these big races in Georgia and Florida, that's when the math really starts to work against her. It's already working against her, obviously, but that's when the writing is on the wall, when you get to that 1,215 delegates that really solidifies the nomination for Donald Trump. It's going to be harder to go beyond those, correct?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you have to be an insurgent against your own party to continue past the mathematical point of no return. And again, you think back to Bernie Sanders, and and he was willing to go on even though there was just literally no way the math could work in his favor. Once we get to that, the only thing that could keep Nikki Haley in is something you brought up earlier. What about those criminal trials? When he has to focus more of his attention on being physically in court, in front of a jury, in front of a judge, will that leave enough opening for her to stay in, even if the math no longer gives her the ability? So, normally, yeah, once the math says so, she would have to pull out. But given what Donald Trump's facing in the courtroom, maybe not.
Yeah, we are in a different world right now, politically speaking, including whether, when you lose your home state like Nikki Haley just did tonight, she's still going to go forward regardless. So it's fundraising, it's support, it's the like. We're going to see it play out on the trail going forward. But right now we're going to go to Maayan Schechter here in Columbia at Donald Trump's watch party, which is pretty much wrapped up there. It looks like everyone heeded Donald Trump's advice to go on home.
Gavin, you just stole my line. Right, the former president told everyone to get out, go home, and obviously, as you can see behind me, that's what people have done. For the most part, there's probably more reporters here than there actually are Trump supporter members of the crowd that were here earlier. We saw some of his supporters going up to the podium, taking photos, walking across the floor like they were the former president winning tonight's primary. So yes, right here in Columbia, the party is done, and election night from here is over.
Right.
Back to you.
Thrilling scene there, Maayan. Thank you for that. We're going to go to Thalia Edie down there in Charleston, where we just heard from the former governor give her concession speech, her second place speech since we heard from the former president winning up here. Thalia, what's it like down there? Is it still popping?
Just a little bit, Gavin. So the former governor and former UN ambassador said that she is a woman of her word, doubling down that she is not going to pull out tonight. She actually ended her speech with the term onward, or with the word onward. She thanked a few people, and she also thanked her family and her supporters and her friends, also giving God credit. But that, just like she said on her bus tour, the last few days of early voting and throughout today, she's not leaving the race, not until everyone has had a chance to have their voice heard, and that's exactly what she said tonight. So onward indeed. She said they're off to Michigan tomorrow and focusing their attentions now on Super Tuesday with the more than 21 states and territories who will cast their ballots then. Reporting live in Charleston at the Charleston Place Hotel, I'm Felicia Eden. Back to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Alicia. Yeah, I hear Sheryl Crow on the speakers there, Woman in the White House, that song written for Hillary Clinton. But definitely a big part of the playlist there. I'm sure Nikki Haley was working the rope line because you saw that crowd up there too. Scott, when I would see her really engage with folks, right? I saw her in Iowa, I saw her in New Hampshire, I saw her crisscrossing the state over the past 2 weeks. She spends a lot of time talking to people after she's done giving her 20 to 30 minute long stump speech, really try to engage people, telling people to take folks to the polls. That's different than what Donald Trump does. He doesn't need to do that anymore. Right. He has these big rallies. He also has Secret Service protection, which Nikki Haley has applied for, is going to get it at some point, apparently, once the Department of Homeland Security approves that, but maybe not. I mean, who knows how long she stays in this race, but there were credible threats against her family and herself, enough so that they had to apply for that. But what did we see in those two scenes there between the two, with Thalia Edie and Maayan Schechter?
Well, Trump is a celebrity. He's always sort of run as a celebrity. People come and see him the same way they would go to a rock concert. They come and see the show. They hear their favorite hits, and they really enjoy that. And he doesn't work the people, and it's interesting because that has traditionally been such an important part of Iowa and New Hampshire, the so-called retail politics. And to a degree, you needed to do it in South Carolina as well. Nikki Haley is very adept at that. I mean, she's very personable. She can get in with the crowd and engage in a way that you don't expect Donald Trump to be able to have a conversation with your average person from Pickens County or wherever, because he's a New Yorker, born and bred, been wealthy all of his life, nothing in common. Whereas Nikki Haley will find something to engage a voter with, but. Despite that being the hallmark of a winner in Iowa and New Hampshire in years past, that's just not who the party is anymore.
Yeah, and to that extent, Scott, we even heard the former president talk about Nikki Haley's husband, Michael Haley, who is serving overseas in the Horn of Africa in support of U.S. Africa Command. And he kept saying, where is he? It's something that probably would have cost any other candidate, the entire nomination, their entire career didn't matter. He also, not only undermine NATO and the alliance, the security alliance on the European continent, especially as one of the biggest countries over there. Ukraine is under attack from Russia, and even mentioned about how he had told a leader of a NATO country that if you don't pay your dues, your 2% of your GDP for defense spending, that not only would we get you out of NATO, but we'd invite Russia to attack you.
Tell them to do whatever they wanted. Yeah, and that would have got him kicked out of the Republican Party in years past as well. But we've seen that, Donald Trump really is Teflon. The remarks he made on the celebrity bus, I forget the comment, but early on in his career would have ended a career. Paying off a porn star would have ended anyone's career. None of this matters to Donald Trump supporters. They just want to see this man go to bat for them, and they would like for that bat not to be metaphorical, it seems like some of them. So again, things that would take down any other candidate seem to just run off of Trump's back like water off a duck.
Yeah, and energize that base too, like we're talking about. We can get some latest numbers too. We're still seeing the results come in now almost 2 hours after the polls closed. Donald Trump there. Again, that healthy 21-point margin between him and Nikki Haley, something that seems to continue to grow, but is still below what we were seeing in the average of polls, Scott. So until it gets to maybe that 30%, is this still, somewhere that Nikki Haley feels comfortable with? Obviously, she would have liked it to have been closer, but it's not a blowout. Is that a blowout? What do we define this as right now?
Normally, it would be a blowout. Especially if there were more folks really running, and yes, there were more names on the ballot, but nobody else was really running. This would normally be a blowout. However, the fact that she is currently beating expectations, I think, is going to be key for her campaign going forward. The real question, as a political scientist, and I've said this again and again, in general, crossover voting just doesn't happen that much. It might have really happened this time. And so, when we get the final reports from the South Carolina Election Commission, looking at how many people who had only ever voted in a Democratic primary in the past, this time voted in a Republican primary, that's going to be some interesting math. And if that explains how she went from a 30-point gap down to just a 20-point gap, which is still a big loss, then that really changes how we look at primaries, especially open primaries.
And Scott, we have about 2 minutes left here and we can start wrapping up, but you did your poll too. You didn't really account for as many Democrats or independents in your polling, but when you look at that, we have so many folks moving to our state from the north. My parents included, my dad, my stepmother, Democrats, but voted for Nikki Haley today. I'm going to call them out there. But I'm wondering, you're seeing that play out with other folks. They weren't here when she was governor. A lot of folks, when I go to these rallies, they raise their hand and say, no, I was not here when you were governor. So some of those northern moderates playing a role there. But also at the same time, you have northern folks who are very big for Donald Trump. I talked to people that moved here just because there are more people like themselves, unlike what they had up north. So what's the party looking like now, 2024 South Carolina Republicans?
The Republican Party, of course has changed about Trump, but it started changing earlier with the makeup of the party with all of these newcomers. And a lot of these folks brought their native Republicanism with them. Remember, 30 years ago, the hardcore Republicans used to be hardcore Democrats and they had flipped parties. Now these folks came in with their native Republicanism. A lot of them retired with union pensions and then came down here to South Carolina with low taxes, lower property costs, a lot more conservative folks who are more in line with them ideologically, and they're finding their home here, and they are changing the look of the South Carolina Republican Party.
And the traffic patterns, too.
Oh, God, help us all.
And our tax revenue. But thanks to Scott Huffman for joining us in studio tonight. Scott with Winthrop University and the Winthrop Poll. And thanks to Thalisha and Mayan in the field out there, braving the elements on those press risers. And for everyone at South Carolina ETV and South Carolina Public Radio, I'm Gavin Jackson. Good night.